It wasn't the most barnstorming race of the season so far, but Max Verstappen has opened the title fight for 2025 with a lights to flag victory where he didn't really look like he was going to get challenged. Maybe because of the McLarens and their team strategy, maybe he's just that quick. Tim Kraaij is here from GPBlog to talk through everything of the Japanese Grand Prix. It was maybe not the most entertaining race, but it was quite interesting for the consequences coming out of this, Tim.
You sometimes have those races, and Japan is not always like Monaco, but it can be those type of races that it looks a little bit boring. But to be honest, I've been on the edge of my seat for the whole race because the top three was so close, and you just realize that every mistake could make sure that something changed at the front, and that makes it exciting as well. And yeah, of course, then we have a finishing order that's almost the same as the starting order. Still, I think there was some excitement, but yeah, not many highlights.
Would you say, though, this is emblematic of the quality of grid that we've got? You've got 20 drivers finishing the race, and those 20 drivers are making so few mistakes. It's going to happen that we're going to have races like this.
Yes, for one part, but I think a lot of drivers were racing on their own as well because they couldn't compete with the guys in front and they didn't have danger from behind. So I think that was something as well, that all of them could drive their own pace. And just for some of them, and especially the top three, those were so close that it was really exciting. But even Charles Leclerc on P4, he didn't have the pace from the front three and could drive his own race because George wasn't coming closer as well. And the wet track wasn't as wet as we supposed it would have been yesterday. I think we still got a proper race, and yeah, especially a nice development for the championship.
The championship rivals from last year, maybe the championship rivals from this year, let's see how things progress. They were maybe the highlight of the race for many people. Coming out of the pit lane side by side, it was all very dramatic with the grass spilling up, and even Oscar mentioning that he saw it when he was in the cool-down room after. What was your take on the closest battle on track between those leaders?
Yeah, lawn mowing, it was said by Max. He thought that Lando was just finding his own way on the grass and thought it needed some cutting. And Lando was quite sportive. Look, they both did their part on the radio trying to convince the stewards of their view, but afterwards they were quite friendly again with each other, laughing about it. Max knew Lando was going to try it, and Lando knew Max was going to shut the door down there. It was the only exciting thing we had there, and that was a strange thing because McLaren did the undercut with Oscar Piastri. And then the next lap, they brought Lando in. And instead of staying out when they saw Max coming in, they went into the pits at the same time. You need to really have a bad pit stop from Red Bull to gain a place. They almost got it because Red Bull had some issues, and Christian Horner spoke in the paddock after the session about the situation, and that Red Bull is working with a reserve crew in Japan this weekend, and they had two guys missing out. So it was maybe more of a C team that we had in the pit crew, and we saw a slow stop with Max and later on with Yuki as well. So yeah, not the fast pit stops that we are used to with Red Bull.
Let's talk then about McLaren and McLaren's strategy. McLaren later in the race didn't go and enact papaya rules, as they say, for swapping positions to let Oscar, who thought he was faster, attack Lando. What's your take on the McLaren pit wall strategies here? It doesn't seem to me like a team that are used to winning championships.
Look, first of all, they missed out on Saturday, most of all. That's the biggest problem because they had a fast car and they didn't reserve the front row for themselves. So that was the first problem. But then in terms of strategy, it was strange. Look, the Oscar one was a gamble that they tried to undercut. It would have made more sense to undercut with Lando because Lando is closer to Max. So that was a little bit strange. But okay, they tried with Oscar to put pressure on Max and maybe getting Max into the pits. But then they pitted themselves. And I think that was the biggest problem. And Christian Horner spoke about that after they saw that Oscar was going into the pits and trying the undercut. They knew already that Lando was going to pit next lap. It was quite clear that they knew what McLaren were up to, and they always should have had some sort of offset by going longer with one and going for the undercut with the other. You have two cars in there. You have the fastest car. You need to try something else to win that race. And now it seemed more like they tried to optimize with two drivers almost acting like they are not part of one team and trying to win the race. And then we had the whole Lando-Oscar situation at the back end of the race. Lando didn't have the pace to take on Max. This was a situation where they at least could have tried to give Oscar P2. Look, if you're not going to pass Max, we give the position back, just like they did in Hungary. But give Oscar the opportunity, because Oscar did way more to Lando what Lando could have done to Max. Lando didn't even come close to the DRS of Max, where Oscar was all over Lando's back in the same cars. But I think Oscar took it well. He tried over the radio to get it his way, but he was also like, yeah, I messed up on Saturday myself. I should have qualified higher, and then the problem would have been there in the race.
The question now comes, was this a one-off, or is Max Verstappen actually going to be a title favorite for this year?
Look, with the car Red Bull has, Red Bull is not the favorite for the constructor, especially with the second driver situation they have. But with Max in your car is giving you an edge. And that's what you have now. And Max is optimizing every weekend, time and time again. And it's up to McLaren to optimize more of their package to really run away with it. But yeah, at the moment they can't, because as long as McLaren keeps on losing points, Max will be in there for the driver championship. And that was something that Christian touched on. You have two drivers that you bet on to race each other, to fight both for the driver championship. And that is the trouble when it's so close, when you fight with a team that has one driver that goes for the driver championship. Every time Red Bull is even near there, Max will be scoring the maximum amount of points of Red Bull. Where with McLaren, you have two drivers on equal qualities, I would say. They will pick and nick points off from each other, and that's what's gonna hurt you on the long term for a driver championship. Is Max the favorite? I would say no, because the McLaren car is the fastest one, but Max will be there. But we'll see again in Bahrain and Saudi, because it's still 3 races done. We've seen last year how much can change around in a short amount of time with McLaren coming back so soon. A lot of the expectation in the paddock is still that Ferrari can turn things around. They haven't been doing so well so far, but if they can get their act together, they can be there as well. So there's still a lot to play for. 21 races left. It's a cliche, I know, but it's still a very long way and a very exciting championship ahead of us.
It is indeed. We've had, 3 different teams winning a race if you include the sprint race. So it is going to be a very open season. We've got to see how things go. We've got to see if McLaren can learn from that 2007 season where they lost a championship, letting their drivers battle against each other. So much still to be excited for. And Tim, you're going to be in the paddock in Bahrain to give us a paddock updates next weekend. Look forward to that. Until then, thank you everybody for watching, and we'll see you then.